Okay, we are on Lamed Daled and Amud Aleph 34a at the two dots, about a quarter of the way down the page. So the Mishnah, the beginning of the Mishnah Mafked is somebody who was watching an item. He was either a shemer chinam or a shemer sachar. He was a shemer chinam. He was an unpaid watchman, and the item was lost or stolen. So he said it was lost or stolen. The owner, the original owner, says, make an oath that you aren't responsible, and then you're exempt from paying. So he said, no, I'll pay. He pays the guy. He does not make an oath, and then it turns out they find the thief. So because he paid instead of making an oath, he's eligible to collect the kefil. The kefil again is that double payment that the thief has to make, because he paid instead of making an oath. Effectively, he bought the kefil. Okay, so Shilim v'leirotz shava. He pays and he doesn't want to make an oath. About a quarter of the way down. Paying doesn't actually mean that he actually paid the money. Once he says that I will pay, even if he didn't actually pay, then he still gets to keep the kefil. Tonight we learned in the Mishnah. The Mishnah says he paid but didn't want to make an oath. So the implication of that is shilam in specifically that he actually gave him the money. Lo shilam, but if he didn't actually give him the money, instead of giving him the money, he said he would give him the money or anything else, or he said he wouldn't give him the money. Either way, but even if you say that you'll give the money, it's not sufficient to collect the kefil. You have to actually give the money. You have to actually pay for it. So the Gemara says, well, that can't be, because you look at the flip side of the Mishnah. Look at the end of the Mishnah. Nishba v'leirotz l'shalom. He made an oath and didn't want to pay. What does didn't want to pay imply? It implies that if he wanted to pay, even if he didn't actually pay, for example, he said he would pay, then you still would get the kefil. In other words, it's only when you make an oath and you don't want to pay. But if you want to pay, even if you didn't actually pay, then you would get to keep the kefil. If you wanted, even if he didn't pay, the watchman would be able to keep the kefil. So the Gemara says, well, you have two contradicting inferences. The answer is we don't know what to make of it, and therefore it's not neither side has a good proof. Okay. Tiny Kava said, we have a Bryce that supports Rabbi Yochanan. The Bryce says, somebody is a seicher. Seicher is a renter. Okay. For our purposes, we'll presume that a renter has the same laws as a paid watchman. For argument's sake, we'll get to it later in the Masechta. We'll talk about what exactly his responsibility is. Okay. So v'nigniva, the animal was stolen. The guy says, the guy says, I'm going to pay you, and I'm not going to make an oath. And then they find the thief. The renter gets to keep the kefil. Okay. So over here also we see that just the expression of I want to pay is sufficient to, so to speak, purchase the rights to the kefil should the thief be found. And like we pointed out, we should really repeat what we saw in the Gemara yesterday. Remember, if a thief admits that if the thief sees the guy walking to court and with two witnesses about to testify to his action, he can run ahead and admit to it, and then he's exempt from kefil. Kefil is a knas, it's a penalty. Don't pay it if you admit first. So kefil is not exactly the easiest payment to collect, or to even it's not the easiest payment to even require somebody to pay for. Okay, it's Amar Papa. Papa says, Shemer Chinam, you have a unpaid watchman. Kiman Shamar Pashati, let's say that he says I was negligent. So I gave my item to John Doe to be able to watch, and my item was stolen. And John goes, yeah, it's true, it was stolen, but it was my fault. I kept my doors unlocked that night, or something like that. I kept it in the car and parked it outside, in downtown area. Okay, so it's a pshia. It's negligence. It's negligence, the type of negligence that you're liable for. So the Gemara says, as soon as you say pasha, as soon as you're an unpaid watchman, you say I was negligent. 34a, but halfway down the page. As soon as you say I was negligent, so you're admitting that you have to pay and you can't make an oath because you were negligent. Making like Folio, that is the purchase, so to speak, meaning through that statement, you acquire the rights to the kefil if it will exist. Why? Because the boy pater nafshe b'gneva. Because when you say pashati, you're believed immediately. Because had you not wanted to say, had you decided to exempt yourself from payment, you would have said it was stolen and would have made a false oath. But because the watchman chose to pay instead of exempting himself, therefore he gets to keep the kefil. Shomer sachar, similarly, a paid watchman, kivan she'amar nignava, make it like Folio. Let's say a paid watchman says the item was stolen. There was sort of a minor negligence, not a gross negligence. So making like Folio, he gets to keep the kefil. Why? He could have exempted himself with the animal breaking a bone or suddenly dying. Meaning, even if you're a paid watchman, you're only liable for some amount of negligence, like lost or stolen. It's some sort of minor negligence. If there's no negligence at all, an example of this, by the way, is armed robbers, right? Armed robbers, there's nothing you can do about it. Or like the Gemara says, the animal trips and breaks a bone, or the animal suddenly dies, then you're exempt. Now, the renter, the paid watchman could have said, if he wanted to, that I'm exempt from payment because the animal suddenly died, or the robbers were armed. He chooses not to exempt himself, right, and to pay, and therefore he gets to keep the kefil. Similarly, shayel, you have a borrower. Okay, so let's explain the rules of a borrower. We explained this a couple of weeks ago, a week and a half ago or so. A borrower is responsible for everything. It's his responsibility to make the lender whole. And again, over here in English, the borrower and lender are used for financial or for physical items. In Hebrew, they're two separate words. So loiva and malva is a borrower and lender of money, and shayel or mashal, or any expendable item for that matter. Shayel or mashal is the word for a borrower who has to return the item as is. Okay. So shayel has to pay for everything, even in things that are beyond his control. What's he exempt from? Only one category, called Mesa Machmas Malacha. What does this mean? A guy rents a tractor, and in the normal course of work of the tractor, it stops working. Now, obviously, if you rent, I'm sorry, you didn't rent it. I'm sorry, he borrowed a tractor. Okay, if you borrow a tractor, clearly your purpose is not to put the tractor in the museum for a couple of days, right? Obviously, you're intending to use it in the normal way of use, and therefore, the guy who the lender understands that it's going to be used that way, and therefore accepts the responsibility that if in the normal course of use it dies, it breaks, then the borrower is exempt.
Right, because it's normal.
Right, and obviously that sort of it would have happened to the original owner too, and therefore it's sort of an agreement that is excluded.
Where does the armed robbery come in?
Armed robbery is in the category of inus. You have to structure it. We have gross negligence. Okay, that's basically what a shomer chinam is chayav on. We call it pshia. Then you have minor negligence. Minor negligence is what a shomer sachar is liable for, but not a shomer chinam, and that is lost or stolen. Then we call inus. Inus is things that are totally beyond your control.
Like
as my teacher used to say, it died. A helicopter crashed into it. There's nothing you can really do about it. Okay, and then you finally have Mesa Machmas Malacha, which is sort of a unique category. It only applies if you have permission to use the item. So like a renter or a borrower. If you're a watchman, you have no business touching it. It is a museum piece for you. Don't touch it. Don't park in your garage and don't use it. But if you have permission to use it, then it's expected that the item will be usable. And if it dies in the normal course of use without any negligence associated, then you would be exempt. Okay. However, if a borrower says I'll pay, then you don't get to keep the kefil. Why? There's no way for a borrower to exempt himself from payment. The only method is the animal dies in the normal course of labor. That is uncommon, and therefore it's a sort of a difficult claim to make, and because the borrower is not admitting to anything, obviously the borrower is obligated to make the owner whole. There's no admission, so to speak, when he says the item was stolen. There's nothing. He doesn't change the law here. Obviously, he'll have to pay for it. He has to pay them in the moment he borrows it. So therefore, the original owner does not sell him the kefil. There's no trade-off over here. In other words, normally speaking, the owner appreciates the fact that the negligent party is being honest with him, because the negligent party could have exempted themselves from payments, but chose not to. But in the case of a borrower, that logic is not correct. He could not have exempted himself. Some say another version of a similar price, another version of Rapapa. So in the first version of Rapapa, a borrower does not get to keep the kefil if he admits. In the second version of Rapapa, he also gets to keep the kefil. Because if he wanted, he could exempt himself from payment by arguing the animal died in the normal course of labor. This is what Abaye says. A shoyl does not get to keep the kefil until he pays. My time, because all the benefit is given to a borrower. When you talk about a renter, a paid or unpaid watchman, there's benefit accruing to both sides. In the case of a borrower, the lender has no benefit whatsoever.
This is the same thing. Are we conflating borrower with unpaid watchman?
No, not at all.
I know, right? They're completely
totally different.
Exactly. Yeah. So then I'm a little confusing.
In an example of a renter, in a case of a renter, a paid watchman, or an unpaid watchman, right, both the original owner has benefit from it, right? And perhaps the watchman also has some benefit. Let's examine a renter, right? Mm-hmm. They both get benefit, right? Mm-hmm. The renter gets to use it. The lessee, mm-hmm, the lesser, I'm sorry, gets money. Yep. A paid watchman, the owner gets his item watched, mm-hmm, and the guy gets paid. The watchman gets paid. An unpaid watchman, all the benefit then accrues to the original owner. Right. So that's why the unpaid watchman has the most liability coverage, right, insurance coverage, so to speak. He's the least responsible. However, when it comes to a borrower, it's the opposite. All the benefit is for the borrower, none of it is for the original owner. He gains nothing from it. And therefore, because the relationship is such that it's completely slanted toward the borrower, he's much more liable, and he doesn't get the kefil until he actually pays for the animal. And
kefil's double payment.
Kefil will be double payment for the thief if they catch him and he doesn't admit.
That's what I was confused.
The call, okay. We have a price that supports his vid. Somebody borrows an ox from his friend and it was stolen. The kidam hashayel v'shilam. One second. Somebody borrows an ox from his friend and it's stolen. The kidam hashayel v'shilam. And the borrower comes along and he pays for it. And then they find the thief. One second. One second. Okay, somebody borrows an ox from his friend. So we're talking about borrowing. The nignavan was stolen. The kidam hashayel v'shilam. And the borrower went ahead and paid. And then you find the thief. You pay kefil for the borrower. Okay, So according to the first version of Rav Papa, this is not difficult. Why? Because according to the first version of Rav Papa, when you pay, once you pay, then you got to keep the kefil. One second. Yeah. However, according to the second version of Rav Papa, even a borrower that admits to being required to pay, admitting meaning because he could have argued the animal died in the normal course of work. Rav Papa says the admission alone gets you the kefil without the actual payment. And this Brisa says, no, it's got to be the actual payment. You have to actually transact the money. So Rav Papa mi'alim mi'asnisin. Well, the Mishnah says the same thing. The Mishnah also says that he went ahead and paid. And we explain the Mishnah that doesn't actually mean that he paid. It means that he said he would pay. So similarly, this Brisa also is talking about where he said he would pay. So the Gemara says, no. Midami hasan like tani kidem, hach tani kidem. The Mishnah doesn't say the word kidem. Kidem means he sort of he came ahead, he came forth. So kidem implies that he came forth with money. So the Gemara says, my kidem v'amar. He didn't come forth with money. It means he came forth with an admission. So the Gemara says, no. Well, let's compare it to the other brisa. Okay, so we previously had a brisa before, and the brisa is supporting Rav Yochanan and says that the renter admitted. Okay, in other words, so we changed the terminology. When we talk about a renter, we say he admitted to being responsible. Why is it an admission? Because he could have exempted himself by saying the animal died in a helicopter crash, right? So we use the word Omar, admitted. But when it comes to Shayla, what's the word we use? Kidim v'shilam. He came forth and paid. Why do we change the terminology if we're referring also to admitting? Okay, so the Gemara this massive presumption there. What's the presumption? The presumption is that both brises were said together. They are the same author. So now you're asking a question, why does the terminology change? But maybe the brises were said 100 years apart, and two different authors wrote them. So they use two different terminologies. Is that such a difficult question? So the Gemara says, "Midi gabi hadadi Tanya," were both brises written together? So Tanya, Shalino Tanai deBerav Chiyu deBerav Rav. So they went to the experts on the brises, on these statements, and they asked the experts, "What do you say?" They said, "Yeah, gabi hadadi Tanya. Yeah, they are connected, and therefore the question remains a solid question. It's a good question, Rav Papa." Okay. Next segment of the Gemara. Pshita. This is obvious. Who Amar Einim Shalom? A guy says, "I'm not paying. I'm making an oath." So let's make a simple scenario. We have a watchman, unpaid, right? So he's a free watchman. I agree to watch your Talmud, and then it's lost. Okay. So I said, "I'm not paying. I'll make an oath." And then you know what? Maybe Amar Einim Shalom. Then maybe I said I'll change my mind. Maybe I'll pay you. I don't want to make an oath. Like we pointed out before, Shavuos HaShomrim is a biblical Shavuah, and it is considered scary to make, so to speak. Generally speaking, contemporary courts will not allow you to make a Shavuot D'oraisa. Contemporary Jewish courts, yeah.
And that's because, like, if it's $10, it's worth
because
$10.
there's a penalty. There's a penalty for making an oath. Period, even if it's true. It's strongly discouraged. Okay, okay, so the guy says, first he says, I'm making an oath. Then he says, no, I'm paying. Fine. He said he's paying, he gets to keep the kefil. What happens in the opposite? He says he's going to pay. Then he says, no, you know what? Maybe I won't pay. I'll make an oath. What's the story? Do we say he changed his mind and therefore he doesn't get to keep the kefil? Or do we say he's just giving the guy a hard time? He's too scared to make an oath. He's not making an oath, and therefore he's entitled to the kefil. So why is he saying he's making an oath? Just to negotiate better, give the guy a hard time.
Why would we do that?
Why do you want to give the guy a hard time?
No,
I don't know.
His thing.
So
right? Well,
he doesn't have the money to pay.
Oh, he doesn't have the money to pay.
I don't know.
Missed that part. Okay.
I had something happen to me not that long ago where somebody was responsible for significant loss of mine,
Yeah.
and they never volunteered to pay.
Oh,
I shouldered it myself.
yeah.
Okay. It's the type of thing that was sort of questionable whether I would in a case, even though it's clearly the other guy's fault, but
Yeah.
There were a number of other conflicts. I tried hinting at to him to pay, and I was a little more explicit than hinting, but he didn't want to pay, so okay. He didn't pay for it. Okay. Okay, Amar Harenim Shalom Umeitz, Amar Bon of Einem Shalom. Okay, so now, let's just contextualize this Gemara. We're going to have a whole bunch of questions here, one after another. So basically, the idea here is let's sort of frame where we are and where we're going to. So right now, where do we stand? Generally speaking, we have, again, I give my item to John to watch it, and John loses the item. John says I'll pay. He gets to keep the kefil. Why? He sort of saves me. He could have exempted himself completely, right? Now that he's not exempting himself, so therefore I sort of gift him the kefil as part of that appreciation that he doesn't exempt himself. Now, so there's some amount of, as I pointed out, there's some amount of appreciation here. But what happens if we minimize that appreciation, right?
Appreciation of the cable?
Appreciation.
Yeah, appreciation of the cable.
No. Appreciation of the fact that he's admitting and not and not exempting himself. That he's paying me as opposed to exempting himself. He could exempt himself, he could make an oath.
He's just giving that money back.
The watchman could exempt himself from paying kefil by saying it was lost or stolen.
Yeah.
He's not doing that. Instead, he's agreeing to pay. That in consideration of that appreciation, the kefil goes to him. What happens with that appreciation is minimized, and that's a whole bunch of scenarios. So basically around this question.
And when you say he gets kefil, I mean he gets.
If the thief is found, the kefil is paid to him.
And that means the double payment.
Both principal and the double payments.
Okay.
He's already paid for the principal, so of course he gets the principal.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Okay. So what do we have? First scenario is Amar Harenim Shalom Umeis. The guy says he's going to pay. Fine. The watchman said I'll pay. Umeis, and then he dies. The Amar Bonav and his son say, "Ain't no Shalman. We're not paying. We'll make an oath." My mi amrin beheder kahatrbe. Who? I don't know. Do we say they're changing their minds, or do we say they're just giving him a hard time and they're really continuing what their father told them to do? Okay. What about Shalmu Bonim? What happens if the guy dies, the watchman dies, and the kids pay? They don't make an oath. What's the story? Is there an appreciation there or not? Do we say that the appreciation is also in consideration of the fact that he was a watchman? And I know the watchman, your father. I don't know you, the kids. Therefore, I have no appreciation for you, and therefore you don't get the kefil. Or maybe we say no, he appreciates the father and the kids, or maybe because he appreciates the father, he appreciates the kids. Same idea. Moreover, Shilam Labanim, the original owner dies, and now his sons take over. The owner's sons don't have any appreciation. They never entrusted their item, right? It was their father that did it. So what's the story there? Do we say that our father sort of would have given you the kefil because our father was still alive and he appreciated that you were his watchman, but we don't have that appreciation, so we don't want to give you the kefil. Or do we say it makes no difference? Shalmu banim l'banim. What happens if both people died, the watchman and the owner? So now the kids are paying the kids. What happens? The guy gave him 2 cows to watch, right? And one of them he makes an oath about, and the other one he pays without making an oath. What's the story there? Shalman Ashutfin, he borrowed from partners. Man, he paid to one partner and made an oath to the other partner. Shutfin Shishalu, 2 partners borrowed. 2 partners borrowed an item from somebody else. Man, one guy pays and one guy makes an oath. What's the story? Shalman Isha Vishilam Labailo. So a man borrowed from a woman her ox and paid to her husband. What's the story? Okay, why? By the way, why is the payment going to her husband? Because it's nichse melugs. The husband's entitled to get the payment. The similog is the assets that under normal conditions, without any other specifications, a woman's assets are owned by her, but the use of it goes to her husband until the item wears down. So, for example, the cow would be her cow until the cow dies or stolen, and then the money would go to her husband. So, what's the story there? It's two different people. What happens if the woman borrows an animal, right? And the woman borrows the animal, and her husband pays for it? Does the husband get to keep the kefil or not? All these questions remain unresolved. Rav Huna says, Rav Huna comes in here and he gives a very interesting point. Rav Huna says, anytime a shomer makes an oath, anytime a shomer wants to pay instead of making an oath, he must make a rabbinical oath. Let's explain. What's the concern here? The concern is that Gary gave me his Rolex to watch, right? And I like it. I like it. It's a nice watch. So maybe over here I'm keeping the watch, and I'll say that I'm paying it. I'm saying it's stolen. So there's a concern here that the watchman is sort of forcing the owner into a sale, that he's purchasing the item. So therefore, so if the watchman doesn't want to make a biblical oath, that's fine, but he would have to make a rabbinical oath that the item is not in his possession. So this way we know that he's not sort of stealing it by buying it, forcing the owner into a sale. My time, we're concerned that maybe he set his eyes on the item he was supposed to watch. Meisvei, question. Okay, so let's go through it. Let's just I'll give a little bit of context here before we see the Gemara inside. So let's make a scenario. I'm the borrower and Hillel is the lender, right? Okay. So Hillel's lending me the money. Hillel wanted collateral. Okay, so let's say there are three possibilities here, right? One possibility is I give him my car. Okay, my car is either worth less than the loan, or it's worth equal to the loan, or it's worth more than the loan, right? Okay, now we get into a fight. The fight is like this: you loan me $10,000, I give you my car. You say, and then you lose the car. You drive it off a cliff or something, whatever it is. Okay, car is lost. So now I say, well, the car was worth the loan, so I don't have to pay you anything. We're settled now. We're even. You say, no, car was worth half the value of the loan. Okay, the law in that case is that I win the argument.
You don't take an oath first?
What?
You don't have to take an oath first?
We'll discuss an oath in a second. Okay. What about on the flip side? What about if, let's say I say the car was worth twice the loan, and you say no, it's worth the loan. Same story. There's no oaths that are made. The only time an oath would be made is when we have what's called a bavametzia, which is a partial admission. In either of these cases, by the way, there's no admission. One of us is saying that everything is settled now. It's all over. It's not an admission, right? If one of us argues that the value of the car equals the loan, the case is settled. There's nothing to talk about. It's over. You lost it. It's too bad. This collateral is lost. The loan is paid. If, however, you say the collateral is worth a quarter of the loan, and I say no, it's worth 2/3. So now we have bavametzia, because regardless, I still owe you a third of the value of the loan, right? It's a bavametzia. We have to make an oath. Similarly, the opposite way. If I say the car was worth twice the loan, and you say no, the car was only worth 1.5 times the loan, so you're admitting to owe me money now. Bavametzia got to make an oath. Okay, let's see. Somebody who lends his friend with a collateral. The collateral is lost. He says to him, "Sell hilvisicha olav. Shekel hayeshava." The lender says, I'm just going to put this in dollar terms, equivalent of what the Talmudical equivalent, so it should be easier to understand. So the guys, or you just do the numbers. The guy says 1 coin, 1 sela. The other guy says no, shekel hayeshava. It was worth half a sela, which is a shekel. Okay. And the lender says, no, it was worth a full coin. The coin that I borrowed, the collateral, they were equal. Potter, nobody makes an oath. Second scenario. The lender says, I lent you a coin, you gave me a collateral worth half. The guy says it was worth 3/4. 3 dinarim is 3/4 of a seller, 3/4 of a coin. So there's okay. So if the lender, the borrower admits that he still owes 1/4 of the coin, might have mixas chayev. You have to make there's an admission there. You have to make enough. Next, sell v'sina of beis hayeshava. So in this case, now get to the flip side. I, the lender, say, well, it's actually worth two. The car is worth 2 coins, not 1 coin. Sorry, beis hayeshava. And the lender says, no, it was worth equal. The car and the loan, they're equal. 1 coin for each of them. Potter, no oath, because there's no admission there. Now we get to the second part. The lender said, the borrower says the collateral was twice the loan. It was 1.25 times the loan, 1.25 times the loan. So then, chayev, you have to make a loan. You have to make an oath because somebody mixes. Okay. Mi nishba, who makes the oath? Mi shapakardin etzlai, the guy who has the collateral. Why is this? Shema yishba zev yotzei alasa bikadin. Because we're concerned that if the guy who doesn't have the item makes the oath about the value, so then the guy who has the item will pull the item out of his hat. In other words, he says he lost and stole it. He says it was lost and stolen. It wasn't true. He hid it. And we're concerned here that he's sort of tricking the guy into making a false oath. In other words, so let's concretize this. We'll substitute you for somebody else now because your character is not going to be doing good things. No. Okay, so John is the lender, right? So John, we're concerned here that if we make the lender make the oath, the borrower make the oath, then John, the lender, is going to pull out of his hat the missing Rolex, right? And say, oh, you said it was worth $5,000. Let's get it evaluated. He'll prove him wrong, and then the guy is no longer considered trustworthy. So therefore, the guy who lost the object, he has to make the oath. Okay. Which scenario? If we're talking about the last line of the Mishnah, if you look at the end, the last scenario of the Mishnah, the borrower says it was worth twice the loan. The lender says 1.25. So who makes the oath? Obviously, the lender makes the oath. Not only is the item in his possession, but he's the one who has to pay. He's the bavametzia. He's the one who admits that. He's the one who's admitting half. Okay, so obviously, regardless, he would be the one to make the oath. Okay, who makes the oath? What's the scenario? This scenario. The guy says, I lent you a coin, and the collateral is worth half. The borrower says, no, 3/4. It wasn't half, it was 3/4. Right? In this case, the oath is the lender's oath. I'm sorry, the borrower's oath. The borrower's oath, because he's admitting to still owing 1/4 of the payment. He says the collateral is worth 3/4, which means he still owes 1/4. So he's a bavametzia. The Rabbanon and the rabbi said, make the borrower make an oath. Because maybe if the lender makes the oath about the value, if the borrower makes the oath about the value, maybe the lender made up the whole story. The collateral is never lost. He'll pull it out of his hat, and just to embarrass the borrower, the lender will pull out. Okay, the emisal Rav Huna. 1 second, but if we have Rav Huna says that any time you say that you lost the collateral, you have to make an oath that it is in your domain, specifically because to make sure that you're not buying the collateral, you at the loan. So how is this ever going to happen? How is it possible to pull it out? He's going to invalidate his own reputation. Right. Because he made an oath and said that he never had the Rolex. Yeah. And now he pulls it out of his hat. How can he pull it out of his hat then? Okay, so Amarava, the Gemara says, Sheesh Edim Shenisrfa. We're talking about where there's witnesses that the Rolex was burnt, was destroyed. So if it was destroyed, obviously he won't be able to pull it out of his hat, and he wouldn't make that oath. Okay. So Gemara says 1 second, but if it was destroyed, if it was destroyed, then why does we're saying the borrower has to make the loan, the lender has to make a loan because he has the collateral, but we're saying the collateral was destroyed, right? So how could the collateral be pulled out of the lender's hat if it was destroyed? It's really the borrower's oath, because the borrower is a bavametzia. even though the lender has the collateral. But if we know that for certainty the collateral was lost, we shouldn't make the lender make the oath. It should be the borrower's oath because the collateral is destroyed. There were witnesses that it was stolen.
What about destroyed? Were there witnesses that it was destroyed?
No, it wasn't destroyed. There were witnesses that it was stolen. So we know that it isn't in the domain of the lender.
The collateral was
The collateral was stolen. So we know therefore the collateral is not in the domain of the lender. Therefore the lender does not need to make an oath that the collateral is not in its possession because we know it's not in its possession. Okay, so the Gemara says, well, if it was stolen, how exactly are you going to get it back if it was stolen? So the Gemara says, no, the Torah he could find it. Why? Because he knows who stole it. He could sort of figure out who stole it. So he can discover who stole it, and he can pull the Rolex out from the thief's pocket and show everybody that the borrower lied about its value. So the Gemara says, "Ihachi mishtava malva nami litrich loy v'vlaisi." So even if in other words, even if over here, so we'll make the lender make the oath because he lost the item and he knows who stole it. But maybe the borrower will find the stolen item. So Gemara says and it's unlikely. The lender knows who's been going in and out of his house. It's much easier for him to find the thief. But it's much more difficult for the borrower to figure out who stole the collateral from the house of the lender. Okay. Stop. Okay. Great day.